Everything's results driven. So we're really clear on what the results each course get. And we have a pretty intense sales process. And we're at boutique pricing, right? So that accounts for that. We want to make sure we're getting people that are very interested in a transformation. We don't do babysitting. We don't tolerate fixed mindset or victim mindset or any of that.
This is Rebel Therapist, a podcast for entrepreneurs who are trained as therapists and who want to level up their businesses, make a bigger impact, feel fulfilled, and be very well paid. I'm your host, Annie Schusler. Hey there. I love bringing you behind the scenes of successful businesses. Today, I'm talking to a healer and entrepreneur who has built a robust ecosystem with high-priced offerings. I asked her about how she's developed her offerings, her sales and marketing processes, and how she's scaled back her work hours. Meet Cate Stillman. Cate has been an innovative teacher and wisdom leader of Ayurveda, establishing yogahealer.com in 2001 and yoga health coaching in 2012 for wellness professionals. Her books include Body Thrive and Master of You. Cate is a leader and author in the field of Ayurveda, peak performance, habit evolution, and Dharma. She's a global online community leader at Yoga Healer with her podcast, The Yoga Healer Show. She leads Yoga Healer with her remote team and is an avid recreational athlete with skiing, mountain biking, whitewater paddleboarding, and surfing with her family in the mountains of Wyoming, in the United States, and Punta Mita, Mexico. Welcome, Cate. I'm so excited. It feels like we're getting to kind of continue a conversation because I was interviewed for your podcast, so we got to talk. And I don't know what's coming out first and second, but either way, it feels like it's a good continuation where I get to ask you much more. So will you tell us about your business model, like what the different services are that you offer and which ones are the big ones?
Yeah, you bet. So Yoga Healer, I started 20 years ago. And one of the, what kind of came to me even then was that I was a curriculum creator. And what happened down the lane was that I was a community builder. And so a lot of what's evolved over the last 2 decades is curriculums and communities. So each curriculum has a community and there's a lot of overlap. So there's like a lot of Venn diagram overlap between various course member communities at Yoga Healer. In 2012, I started Yoga Health Coaching, which is a professional development program for a lot of different types of wellness professionals. It sounds, and it was initially geared more towards people that were interested in yoga philosophy and growing their career. So because of my background in Ayurveda, the healing science of yoga, there was just a lot of like, hey, what's the yoga of business looking like? And my colleagues were coming to me for Ayurveda. And then they were like, you seem to understand business better than the rest of us. And so at that point, I developed a training that quickly became over 50% of the revenue for the company.
And so the way that you work, the way that your mind works, and it sounds like the way your business works is like the curriculum kind of comes first, like you're building something for someone and then the community comes. Is that right?
It's much more of a conversation, like community curriculum and conversation. And these conversations I call dynamic dialogues. And so with the existing people in a course, what happens is they birth the next curriculum, essentially. And I am listening, right? And then I'm researching and I'm learning as well. So I always say, I'm the leader, I'm leader of the pack, but I'm also a member. And so part of that is there's this approachability and this conversationality that gives rise to the next thing that the community needs. And at this point, we have a very mature ecosystem of course member curriculums and these community driven curriculums. So there's not at this point this need to create the next curriculum. What we're doing more is we're enfolding evolution into each of those curriculums as we go.
Can you give me an example of a curriculum that arose that way?
Yeah, you bet. Yeah. So I'll talk about two actually. So the oldest one, I mean, they're all kind of the oldest ones because they all have roots to these workshops I was teaching in San Francisco in 2000, 2001, as I was just kind of like trying to integrate for yoga students and yoga teachers the deep wisdom of Ayurveda to bring that to modern people right now, and in a way that was really easy to get a lot of value from, like a lot of direct value in your life where your life gets better really fast. Like you notice a difference next week. So I was doing that over 20 years ago before I started Yoga Healer, and the roots of those curriculums, like I took a 2-hour crash course, and now it's a year-long curriculum called Body Thrive. And I have a book on that. But if like you look at the roots of that, I was teaching it in 2000. And basically what happened was it's like information doesn't equal transformation.
Right.
Right? It's like someone will know what to do. It doesn't mean they can adopt the habits. And that was essentially the habits of yogis I was teaching 22 years ago. Now we find it takes about a year for someone who may even be a yoga teacher for 2 decades coming into that curriculum to get to habit automation, to get to the point where they're like, oh my gosh, like I now have embedded in my daily rhythm the regenerative habits that make me better year over year, make my health better, make me experience like a lot more of the subtle anatomy, which is where yoga goes into, where you actually are experiencing your chakras and you're experiencing your koshas, and you're much more on a deeply aware enlightenment path because of your daily habits are now not working against you. And we find that transformation over 20 years of experience. It's like, I used to think I could do it in 2 hours. That was in 2000. Around 2013, I thought people could do it in 10 weeks. And now, add another decade, and I'm like, it takes us a year, to really get to full automation. And another example is the Yogi Detox, which I started in 2002 as a 1-week cleanse. 20 years later, we've launched it twice a year. We've launched it twice a year since 2002. And we just find what works. And so it's changed a lot. The curriculum has changed based on people are much more educated about detox now than they were 20 years ago, but people's habits are worse than they were 20 years ago. Like, if you just look at the stats of like what's happening with chronic systemic inflammation, that's worse than 20 years ago. It's like, you can look at any number of these stats and it's like, people were getting more sleep 20 years ago. So the curriculums have to adapt with what's going on with people right now.
And it's not just information. It's the curriculum involves doing, living with, experiencing.
Yeah, so everything's results driven. So we're really clear on what the results each course get, and we have a pretty intense sales process where, and we're at boutique pricing, right? So that accounts for that, where it's like, we want to make sure we're getting people that are very interested in a transformation. We don't do babysitting. We don't tolerate fixed mindset, like or victim mindset or any of that. And it makes our community very, very progressive, so that when like someone joins into the community, they're joining into it's like a force field that's been very developed over time, because I have been literally standing in the same place for 20 years, and we're just getting better and better at what we're doing. But we also have this whole infrastructure of membership. And there's, even within that membership, there's mentorship. And the mentorship program helps new members get up to speed quickly so they can actually get results faster than members did a few years ago. And that kind of progressive evolution is, it's something that, it's cool that that's what's organically happened, as I've been very interested in business and learning how to run a business that can do something like this. And that's really deeply rooted in the ancient wisdom traditions. So people get a little bit of the best of the both worlds in terms of like, how do we use technology? Well, we've been online since, I was pregnant with Indy. And so that was like 07, like 07, 08 was the first, like we made 20K, first 20 people in Living Ayurveda course was then. And that course, I know in the questions that you're going to ask was like the revenue split. Like we were having a really hard time enrolling that course until about a year ago. And we made a bunch of changes to it. And now enrollment for that is way up.
Interesting. What are some of the changes that stand out to you
with that particular course?
Yeah.
So that course is, we call it, it's like a healing journey course. So our target for that course is someone who is struggling with there's two main targets, like someone who's really on a self-healer path. They may have an autoimmune disorder, they may have a cancer diagnosis, they may have just like a number of like vague symptoms, like brain fog, like all the things that add up to chronic systemic inflammation, where they're just like, I can't concentrate. I'm angry all the time, or irritated and frustrated all the time. And, all the doctor wants to do is put me on medication, and all the holistic practitioner wants to do is put me on a bunch of supplements. And like, I want to know what's really going on. I want to understand my own physiology. I want to understand the root cause of disease. I want to understand my own health history and how imbalances have stacked up over time. And I want to be able to get to the root of it. And then I want to change the trajectory in my life so that my body's regenerating. Like, that kind of person who's thinking that way is a perfect fit. Then we also get a lot of people that are like yoga teachers that want to learn Ayurveda, because it's this like sort of like mystical sister science of yoga, and it sounds cool. And I know I'm a Pitta Vata, and I know I have an imbalance in Vata, but I don't really understand this language. I don't really know what I'm saying when I say those words. And I want to know, and I want to be able to help my yoga students have a glimpse into what is their constitution. And I want to be a better yoga teacher. I want to be a better massage therapist or holistic practitioner. So we get a bunch of them in as well. I like to say in general, for like businesses that are under a few $1 million, like under $5 million in gross revenue, that almost all problems are internal. And so in terms of like what was wrong with the sales of that course, it was just internal. It was just our marketing was not, our customer journey through our marketing and sales process wasn't fine-tuned enough. But also we were just launching that course once a year. Like, we were stuck in like, we want the group to go through this in this process together, where beginners are beginners and then they graduate together. And in our other courses, one of the key lessons learned, and it's not easy for businesses to do this, and anyone who's just starting out and like growing an online course, it's very challenging to do this. But because that's not me, what we found over time is that actually having set start dates with something where it's a mix of rolling enrollment with just frequent enough start dates. So people don't start randomly. Everyone's onboarded in a core group, but we just changed it to having 3 start dates instead of 1, and having a preparatory process so that we could get someone to start each month. But then that course didn't start until might not start till next month. It might start in 3 or 4 months.
And no one has to wait more than 3 or 4 months.
No one
That's
at this point needs to wait more than 3 weeks, because Body Thrive, which is that other curriculum, the habit course, which every course member of our major curriculums also has access to Body Thrive. And that for us is like our baseline course.
And so they start with that.
Yeah, even if they're a wellness pro in our professional development program, what we learned over time is like wellness pros think think their habits are better than they actually are, and think they know more than they do. And it doesn't matter if they're in it for a few decades. And we totally honor and respect what they do know, because their unique expertise is phenomenal. And, thank gosh for our wellness pros. But what we do is like, we bring it down to like the basics of the basics, and get people in a very, very deep level of integrity with themselves and their habits. And that happens in Body Thrive. So no one has to wait more than a few weeks.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, I know for my business, I did this little analysis where I had thought, I think a lot of people think this, I had thought that people need to be with me for a long time, and they need to like get my emails for months and months and months, or sometimes it would happen like years and years, and then they would sign up. And I think those stories stand out, where someone says, hey, I've been following you for 5 years. But actually, when I did the analysis, I saw that most people who sign up to work with me have found me within the last few months, or at least signed up for my email or started listening to my podcast within the last few months. And that once someone is looking for something and knows it's the right fit, they're often ready. And so I also have enrolled a lot more people. This isn't why I did it, but I've enrolled a lot more people since I had more frequent start dates. I made that change partly because of my own rhythms of, just doing something twice a year. It wasn't the right energy for me. But yeah, that also, it makes sense that you're not making people wait when they raise their hand and they say, I'm ready for this. They
Yeah.
can get started.
Yeah, exactly. People don't wait anymore. 'Cause they'll just go on, if they have an urgent need, it's just part of the attention economy. The market has changed drastically, especially in the United States and Canada. It hasn't changed quite as fast in Europe in terms of people buying online courses and people having more virtual mentorship. So there's not much hesitancy in the US market anymore. There still is in Europe, but there's not, and even like in Australia, the hesitancy is way down. It's more closely, I would say, tied to the US and Canada. So people are much more used to pulling out their credit card on the internet. Like more people that are of different generations, not just millennials and Gen X, and so that's a significant shift in the global economy, and I'm seeing more and more of these significant shifts that are really changing the landscape of those of us who are running online companies.
Mm-hmm. A thing about that I've noticed, and this is much more anecdotal, that I've noticed that one place where I've gotten more hesitant and I see other people getting more hesitant is around courses that don't have an involvement from a facilitator, like just courses that are completely self-led. That's some place where I see people saying like, yeah, I don't complete those. Like I've purchased those and I don't complete them, and so I don't purchase those anymore. So I see people wanting community facilitation, like some kind of human involvement. Do you see that?
It depends on the type of material it is. So for instance, like with marketing or something like that, some of those courses on like that I have my team use in digital marketer are great because they can just go in and get a skill,
Yeah.
you know. And if it's very much that type of like of skill driven learning, then that can be that can be great. But yeah, I think what we know over time is that the engagement is what matters. It's troubleshooting, it's being available, it's being supportive. It's like some people need a lot more mentorship than than others. And also what we find a lot in our courses is like people are coming in with a really different basically portfolio of skills, right? And there's some overlap between what they all need, but it's also it really depends on what they're coming in, where they're really starting with. So for instance, in our Body Thrive course at Yoga Healer, like some people come in and they already have like, let's say like 6 out of the 10 habits. So they might be strong in meditation and they might be weak in intermittent fasting, something like that. Someone else will come in and they'll be a mess in everything. Like everything will be like all over the place, and they're suffering, and they're because their lives are so chaotic in terms of the habit rhythms that support the human physiology. They're going to need often a lot more emotional support than someone who's coming in with like 5 of those 10 habits already in automation, where they might actually be really wanting to experience levels of peak performance and also just be on the cutting edge of their own understanding of microbiome, of immune system, of autophagy and fasting and stuff that we talk about all the time, where they're just like, where does it go? Where does it go next? Where does it go next? Like, how do I unlock my subtle body? How do I experience my chakras? Like, like that kind of stuff. And like someone else comes in and they're just a shit show, and they're like barely able to get out of bed in the morning without pain, and they're struggling with brain fog and all the things. And that kind of person is going to need a lot more of what you're saying, of like a lot more of engagement at the level of support rather than engagement at like, where's this community going on its cutting edge? Because I want to be part of that.
In a moment, you'll hear me ask Cate about that boutique pricing and how much her programs cost. First, I want to invite you to register for Create Your Program. This is my intensive small group process to expand your business beyond private practice. You're going to go from having an idea or perhaps a bunch of ideas that you need to narrow down to actually launching a pilot program. You get a lot of brave work done in a supportive group of driven and open-hearted and progressive folks like you. You have so many ways to get your questions answered throughout our time together, and you get a lot of attention from me. This is for you if you're a therapist or a healer and you want to expand your business and you do not want to waste time or get stuck in overwhelm. Go over to rebeltherapist.me/create to learn all about it and register. All right, let's get back into it with Cate and talk about that money. So you mentioned boutique pricing. How did you land on your prices, and can you share any of the prices of?
Yeah, I can share all the prices. Yeah. So, for like 3-week yogi detox, that's a starter course. But it's like a starter course. I mean, it's super diversified. It's intergenerational. So we have like from beginning to like experts in the field that come in to find out what we're doing next, because we're very innovative and progressive, right? So we have that sort of cutting edge. So we have people that have been teaching detox for 10 years that sign up for Yogi Detox because they're like, what's Cate doing this time? What's happening right now? And that helps them lead their own detoxes with their own communities as well. And then we have the person that I described before who comes in who just is like, I need help. Like I'm out of rhythm and I don't feel well and I don't understand what I can control and what I can't control. And we do that live twice a year, April and October. The other courses, like for major courses, our courses are long. And the reason they're long is we know that it takes time for people to get results. They didn't used to be, and over time, it's like everyone's in for at least a year. Why? Because we know where you're starting and we know what you need. And that's part of our sales process. If someone's actually a fit for the course, it means, they need time with the curriculum, but they also need time with the community.
Mm-hmm. How are you pricing those things?
So Body Thrive is $5K, Living Our Ayurveda is $6K, Master of You and Yoga Health Coaching are $15K. And Master of You and Yoga Health Coaching are 2-year programs. And so they're not even, to me, it's like they're not actually very expensive at $7,500 a year, given the kind of professional development trainings that like I've invested in myself. Like I've paid a lot more than that. And the kind of value and community that we provide, I feel like we're actually doing it in a way that's they get a lot more value than they get a huge return on investment. I'll just put it that way. They get a lot more value than often other communities and courses as far as what we're competing with are providing.
Yeah. How do you land on those prices? Do you check in with like I'm assuming that it's value-based pricing, but what's your process?
Yeah, results-based pricing. So we're really looking at like what if you don't have skin in the game, we cannot help you. Right. So say someone comes in as a wellness pro, say they've been teaching Pilates for 15 years in yoga, and say they do public, they do private, or they do some mix of that. They do online, they do local, they do some mix of that. They have a website, they have a social following or some mix of that. And they're looking at like, how do I keep bumping my head on the time ceiling? Like, how do I stop doing that? They're also often bumping their head on the client result ceiling, where they're not actually able to make the kind of impact and work with the kind of people that are very highly motivated to really access the wellness pros full set of skills. Right. And so it often feels like, I'm kind of babysitting. Like I'm getting paid well. I'm a really high paid babysitter. I might make $200 an hour as a babysitter, as a movement and flexibility coach babysitter. But like my people are not dramatically evolving. So with a wellness pro like that, what we do is it's like, let's change your business model. Let's get you more leading a journey that's results-based and increasing with skin in the game. And so if our wellness pros don't have skin in the game with us, if they're not invested $15K with us, they're not going to do it.
Did you have a moment yourself of getting more comfortable with raising prices, with, having?
Yeah, I remember I was, it was like a decade or so ago, and like Living Our Ayurveda course at that point was maybe priced at like $2K or something like that. And I was at a women's business training, and one of the things we were doing, we were like, it was like a big group, and then we had our little groups within the big group, and we're sitting at this table, and I'm talking with a few of the gals next to me, and they look at my pricing, and they're like, "You got to double it." And I was like, sort of the deer in the headlights look, and I sat with it, and they were great. They were really great women. They were further along in their career than I was. I was pretty, whatever. I was further along in my modality and technical training than I was in my business training at that point. They were more further along in their business training. And I was like, holy shit, like I'm going to need to change my sales process if I change my pricing like that. And that's what I did.
What was a big change in your sales process?
Really starting to study sales and understand how people invest and why they invest, and understand the shadow issues around how people invest. The other thing is it changed my marketing process, because I started to really look at, well, if the part of the purpose of marketing is to overcome objections, and part of the purpose for us in marketing, especially because we're very progressive, is to help people understand how they are thinking and maybe how they're not actually the thinking that they're doing currently isn't driving to the goals that they want to achieve. It might actually be antagonistic to that. So I find in general, how people use money, including myself, like I update how I invest all the time and how I use cash flow now that we're in a more of a less a cash flow type of a economy, since the 70s or the late 60s, since we came off the gold standard. It's like people need to learn to use money in a very fluid and very flexible way that meets their short-term goals and meets their long-term goals. Right. And most people don't have people to talk these things through with. And so instead what happens is they live a subpar life. They have a ton of issues that they could be using their cash differently. They could be using their credit differently to invest in. And actually they would amplify their portfolio over time and feel better. So it's like just breaking that stuff down for people. It's like, oh my gosh, really? We're talking about this instead of me talking about the koshas and the doshas and the kriyas and the and Dharma and the stuff that I'm actually an expert in. I've had to become an expert in like helping people understand how they invest. And that's what we call marketing in sales.
So another I would love to know, because this is obviously a really thriving business you're running and you don't overwork. So how many hours do you think you tend to work on average in a week?
Oh, it's funny. It's changed a lot over the years. My husband and child they're like, what are you doing? Because, I'll have like a massage scheduled and I'll go for a bike ride and they'll be like, what's going on? But it's taken me a long time to get there, you guys. And there is a level of grit and sweat equity that I am now able to really leverage. And I have been, I would say, aggressive in my learning and in my learning of business and team management and people management and task management and how to do annual planning and strategic planning around exactly what are the objectives of the company and like what are the strategies and tactics we're using next to grow and who's managing who. I'm not a strong people manager. And so the team, we hire people opposite to me in general in the company for the most part that have I surround myself with people that can do things that I can't do and love it and love their work and love the opportunity to grow into their capacity. And it's been that has been hard and painful and like egoically destructive for me. So I've earned it. It's like I've earned my leisure schedule. So if I weren't writing books and I was just CEO and head coach, I'd probably be at a 20-hour work week right now with those two jobs, maybe a little. And that's with doing some help in sales. I'll close on, or not do, I don't actually close, but I like to meet the members before they come in. If it's like 6K to 15K, I'll have a 20-minute conversation and it'll be very intense conversation where like they'll listen to that conversation about 5 times because it's really very useful to them. And what else and like stuff like podcasting and stuff like that, where I may be on more shows or less shows, but that's all less than 20 a week.
Why do you take the book writing out of it?
Because it doesn't necessarily, I would say, because it's an untested strategy and it's very creative. And there's a ton of research involved in it. And it has nothing to do so far with it has nothing to do with gross revenue or the bottom line so far. It could in 2 years. But like, if I just wanted a nice job,
you got it. Yeah.
I've got it.
Yeah.
Because I'm not that kind of person. I'm a very intense person, as I'm sure you've picked up, and everyone else has picked up. Like my mind likes to chew on things and work on much, much harder problems to solve. So what's really cool is that I've created a job for myself where I have that creative outlet and it's very flexible, right? Because is the world going to notice if I only publish one book this year and one in the first quarter? Like, no, my course members are going to notice. Outside of that, like it doesn't have a lever in the business yet. We'll see if it does in a year or so. It could, but right now it's just all in testing.
It makes me think too of like, you're in the right business or at least you've created a right business for yourself when you get like really excited about what you can create next for folks. Like I had a good moment the other day where I was like realizing, there's this other piece that I think will help people in my curriculum And first I was like, shit, I can't create that this week. And then I was like, wait a minute, like I never want to stop creating. And this is another thing I get to make. Like, yeah, it's really exciting. So, okay, one more question for you. I want to respect your time. How do most people find your work? Like most of the folks who are signing up, do you know how they?
Yeah, how do people come in? I mean, it's a huge mix from word of mouth to podcasts. I mean, I've had a podcast for a decade to Facebook ads. And then there's the book readers who are finding it on Amazon. There may be their yoga teacher mentioned Body Thrive, that book, something like that. So it's a pretty big mix.
Yeah. And your Facebook ads, do they lead to your free work or what do they end up leading to? Or a mix of things?
Yeah, it's kind of a mix of things. Yeah, what we like to do is a free tip sheet. Like it's like our it's lowest cost per lead. And what we find is that because we have well developed marketing funnels, is like if someone comes in from that, then they go through a bit of a like, oh, there's this whole world in here, uh, and then at some point they're going to end up watching we have monthly free workshops that are very much like on the edge of what we're doing as a community. So they're not, you get an experience of me drawing on the pad, of me, addressing a lot of information in a very short period of time, but also experiencing a transformation through that of like, oh, my thinking's different after this hour. And then I stay on and do Q&A, and it's very community oriented. So we'll have course members there that are like, they're chatting or they're telling a story. And then my salesperson is there and she really organizes. There'll be like the one we did yesterday, we had 750 people register. We had 150 people live. And so there's a lot going on in the chat. And I don't look at the chat at all. I'm just like going, and I have usually a slideshow, but I also have my iPad that I'm drawing on. And there's just a lot happening. It's very interactive, and she'll then tally. She'll be like, okay, there's 5 questions on this, and then I'll just integrate into this sort of fluid, like, what was that, kind of experience. And then people just are regulars on those, and then new people come in because they signed up for the tip sheet, and then that was the next free talk.
Oh, cool. How much time does it take you to prep for each of those? Or do you just show up?
The prep goes from, like, right now we just outlined 4. We're doing a healer masterclass series. So this is a masterclass series for healers. We just ran an Ayurveda masterclass series, and that was for more people who are like self healers than pro healers. So this pro healer series, we sat down. There's maybe 4 of us on the team. And I was like, hey, these are some thoughts that I had. Like, these are some working titles. And we had 6 and we needed to come up with 4, and so we needed to actually like reduce. Then they'll go through SEO. So it's like, this is what we think people are looking for. What are people actually looking for? From there, we'll build bullets. Like, these are these are going to be the takeaways from that webinar. We'll build hashtags of like, these are the hashtags that will relate to that. So we'll have like the SEO, the bullets, the hashtags. Then we'll write the email sequence. Well, then we'll write the pitch of like, this is what we're actually going to pitch on that workshop. And this is how this is connected to that, so that it all makes sense. And then we'll write the emails. We'll see where that goes next. There's a bit of like, if they have the bullets, if my team has the bullets and this and that, there's like a bit of like, they can probably manage both that and the registration page and the thank you page and the customer journey of that, and posting the event on Facebook, and then working with the ads person to like, are we going to drive ads to this or not? Are we going to drive ads to the tip sheet and then have the tip sheet go to this opt-in, or just automatically put them in the email sequence to know that this is the next thing? And then, at that point, it's just, for me, maybe an hour of putting together I'll put together some slides. I procrastinate like hell on this stuff. So like, it'll be an hour before and I'll be like, holy shit, I've got 150 people coming up. I better like get all these thoughts together. And it's like, I kind of wish it wasn't that way, but I'm also so good live with a topic. And I've been doing it for 20 years. And I've been doing online webinars since, literally 2007. So it's like, there's some part of me that just wants to be very available and spontaneous, so that I don't have something that's super canned.
Yeah. And I was just thinking, you get your energy up one time for this event, and there's probably stuff that you can access right before that belongs in that hour that you wouldn't be able to access any other time. So yeah, that's interesting because I do hear that from a lot of folks. Like it happens right, the planning or the intense planning happens right before. That's really neat. Cate, thank you so much for being with us and for giving us your energy.
Thanks, Annie.
Now I'll loop back and share some takeaways that really stand out to me. Takeaway number 1, information doesn't equal transformation. What people need and are willing to pay for is a process to help them implement. You can get all the information you need for free, but making use of it is a lot harder. Cate started with a 2-hour workshop, giving a ton of information that was really valuable. But because of that implementation piece, over time, she developed that 2-hour workshop into a year-long course, teaching and practicing habits.
I used to think I could do it in 2 hours. That was in 2000. Around 2013, I thought people could do it in 10 weeks. And now, add another decade, and I'm like, it takes us a year.
Takeaway number 2, think about how long people have to wait to work with you. So when you're developing a program or a course, if you set it up that folks are going to have to wait a year or even a half a year to work with you, you might be losing a lot of opportunities to work with people. Now, I don't really want you to worry about this when you're at the stage of creating your pilot program, your beta program. The important thing there is to create something amazing and get it out there so that people start giving you feedback and you start getting to help people. But once you're in that phase of working on refining your business model and you're looking at how many times a year are you going to run this program, just know and put that into your decision making. Just know that you're going to limit how many people can work with you if they can only get in once or twice a year because they may need you sooner than that.
What we know over time is that the engagement is what matters. It's troubleshooting. It's being available. It's being supportive. It's like some people need a lot more mentorship than others.
Takeaway number 3, hire people who are different from you and who have skills and interests different from your own. I'm in my own hiring process right now, and by the time this releases, perhaps that process will be in its next stage. And I'm really paying attention to this. I don't want to hire someone who has the same superpowers as me. I want to hire someone with different ones. So this means we really have to acknowledge what we suck at just as much as acknowledging what we're great at. And that can be a humbling process.
We hire people opposite to me in general in the company for the most part that have I surround myself with people that can do things that I can't do and love it and love their work and love the opportunity to grow into their capacity.
So those are 3 of my takeaways. What stood out to you? Send me an email at info@coachingwithannie.com. Even better, include a voice memo so I can share your voice on the pod. Tell me what stood out to you from this conversation with Cate and what is it helping you to rethink in your own business. You can find out more about Cate at yogahealer.com and yogahealthcoaching.com. I want to thank Cosmo Palms for editing this podcast. If you found this conversation supportive, please share it with your favorite therapist, your favorite yoga instructor, your favorite healer. That's how we reach more people. And I so appreciate you listening, being here, being part of this journey. I'll see you next time.